Hi, and welcome to the dinner agenda. This is Bo.
And this is CeeLo.
Hello, CeeLo. How are you?
How I'm good. It was my first day back at work after vacay. So,
That's right. Yeah.
yeah,
Did you
it
have a nice time away?
it was really nice. The weather was great. We did lots of boating and lots of golf. It was hot. Like a couple of days were so hot, you almost didn't want to go outside because it was so hot.
Yeah, it's true. We had I think it was Saturday or Sunday. So, oh, it was both days actually. Because I had gone to a bunch of yard sales around the neighborhood
Hmm.
on Saturday. And I would say probably by the fourth one that I hit, I was so exhausted from the heat,
From the
CeeLo.
heat, right?
Yeah, like it almost like wore me down, like, it was actually making me feel a bit nauseous.
Yeah.
Like, it was just too intense of a heat, and in and out of the car, it's like you weren't having a moment to, like, cool down, because you really couldn't really put the air on, was there was no point because
Yeah.
you were literally like, there were
The
street sales
the
and you were
car
just kind
wouldn't
of.
cool. So was this like
Yeah.
a whole neighborhood thing that was
So
planned, or you just like knew there was two or three in the hood and you were gonna hit them?
so, okay, my cousin and I have issues when it comes to yard sales.
That's another
Um
episode. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, it is another episode. Actually, we should probably have her on to talk about thrifting and to talk about that kind of stuff. But because she's got a real talent and knack for it. But we actually belong to a couple of Facebook groups that tell you where there's yard sales or estate sales, around Ontario, right?
Yeah.
So since the summer has hit, they're popping up every weekend. So like every weekend there's new kind of like, oh, come to this neighborhood. There's this garage sale, or come over to this place. There's an estate sale, a content sale, whatever.
Yeah.
Some of the places have street sales, right? So they'll have garage sales that are like, apparently a lot of the neighbors are supposed to participate. So you just kind of like drive around to each of the areas and you see where they are and you kind of pop out and see what's there. So sometimes you get lucky and there's a few on one street. Sometimes there's, one or two, and then there's another one, around the block kind of thing. So you're kind of just like driving around. And then, when that's done, then you kind of go on to the next neighborhood, if you will. You drive to the next neighborhood. So we were kind of doing that on Saturday, but I lost steam pretty quickly because it was just too hot
Yeah.
and it became too, yeah, just too stifling. And then
Did
Sunday we ended up, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, do you end up buying things? Like, do you find some good
Sometimes,
finds or just more to
sometimes, I
do
mean, not,
something to do?
it's a combination of both, right? Like sometimes it's just something to do. We
Yeah.
enjoy kind of going out and seeing if we can find something that, you know, kind of just strikes us as, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I never knew I needed this, but I do, right? And then other times, you don't get anything. I think the last time we went, I found this really cute concrete chicken. It's like a big chicken made of concrete
Yeah.
with two little chicks. And it's so flipping cute. And I love chickens. And it's just so cute. And so we've got it out in the front yard there and it's just adorable.
Is it
So that was a
painted or is it look like cement?
it's painted. It's painted.
Nice.
It's really cute. See, the next time you
I'll
come,
have to
and you're
look
gonna
for
see
it.
it as you come up the driveway, it's so flipping cute, this chicken with the 2 little chicks. It's really awesome. And because it's concrete, it's, like, heavy duty, so it's not gonna fly away, right? Like, in the
Oh
wind or
yeah,
or anything.
totally. That thing is
Yeah.
sitting there. In fact, you probably
Yeah.
broke your back getting it into the car.
I'm gonna not lie to you, I didn't realize how much lack of muscle I have when I was trying to lift this bloody chicken. So, because I was with my cousin when I found it, so I had to lift it into the car, like, walk it down from the place that I bought it from over to the car where it was parked. Then, of course, I get home and I'm like, "Honey,
Come get this out of the trunk. I got
get
a
this out of the
surprise for
car."
you.
Yeah, pretty much. And then Sunday, because Sunday was another hot day, right? So we
Hmm.
just stayed by the pool. We had a nice little day of relaxation, reading books
A
and that
chill
kind of
day.
stuff. Yeah.
That's nice.
What did you do when you were at the trailer with the heat? Did you go on the boat?
Yes.
Mhm.
Nathaniel got his boat license now, so we said if we're kind of in our
Yay.
bay on the boat, then he can use the Sea-Doo. So he was ripping that around. I
Oh,
think
that's
he
great.
went through like a hundred something dollars worth of gas over a couple of days. So that's cool. But yeah, being out on the water, it definitely makes a difference. It keeps you a little cooler, but then when you get back, you're like, oh, it's stinking hot.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but when you talked about the concrete chicken, It
Yeah.
reminded me back in the day when my dad had the turkey farm, also whole other episode. My dad had this massive, like you couldn't put your arms around it, huge
Really?
turkey, concrete turkey. It's
I
probably
need
still there because
this.
nobody would be able to move it. Like you'd have to
I
get a
need this.
tractor.
Yeah, you need to give me the address of this, and I need to see if I can go find this,
Yep.
this turkey.
Yeah, it was a big
Really?
turkey. Yeah,
He
and it was
really had
painted
this?
white with the little red turkey face. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, he had it.
Did I know that your dad had a turkey farm? Because I don't
I'm
know if
pretty
I knew
sure you
that.
I'm pretty sure you did.
Did I? I didn't know you then, though, did I? No.
No, because it was when I was little. This would
Uh,
have been in the 80s.
okay, yeah. So why does he
Yeah.
not have a turkey farm anymore? Like, what well, I mean, now that he's older, obviously, but what happened? Like, what changed his career path, if you will, I guess?
Uh,
I don't know, whatever.
my dad's career path has been varied.
Okay,
So he used to work in IT at like York University.
okay.
And then when he met his now current wife, my stepmom, her
Uh-huh.
dad had a turkey farm out in Kitchener.
Oh,
And he was
cool.
getting older, and my dad was like, "Hey, that kind of sounds like fun."
Mhm.
So they moved to Kitchener and he took over the turkey farm.
Oh
So
my
he went
god.
from being like in IT to turkey
Yeah.
farming. And then there was, I don't know, there was
Yeah.
several other completely different career things after that as well.
Wow, isn't that amazing?
H&R Block taxes, he did construction, he was a court officer, so taking
That
prisoners
I
back and
remember.
forth and driving the
Yeah,
court officer van. Yeah.
I remember that. I
Yeah.
remember I knew you when he was doing that,
He's
that's
a
for
man
sure.
who likes variety, so there you go.
Apparently.
Hmm.
How's the mouse situation in the trailer?
Well, I have to say, um, we got Nathaniel to plug, only because he is like younger and way more flexible, to help plug the holes with the steel wool stuff. And
Mhm.
we haven't heard or seen anything, but we also set traps as well, and we did not catch anything before we left. So I'm hoping that they
Okay.
were kind of coming in knowing that we were
Yeah,
like the buffet of dog food. And then we started putting that up. I think they were still looking for it, but with the holes plugged, we haven't heard anything. So
that's good.
we'll
So I guess
see.
they were just yeah, like they were coming in, but maybe not living in the walls of the trailer perhaps.
No, I don't think so. And I feel like that was a lot of dog food to move, so I'd be surprised if it was just like one of them. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I don't know how many there were. So we'll see when
Well,
we go
that's
up
good.
this weekend if there's any in the
Yeah,
traps.
that's good.
Stay
That's really
tuned for
good.
next week's episode. I'll have
Yeah.
an
Yeah,
update.
for sure. Well, we had a really good time the weekend before that. We came up to visit you for Canada Day,
Yeah.
and, we had a phenomenal time. It was a lot of fun. You
Yay.
guys really know how to celebrate, that's for sure.
I'm still eating watermelon thanks to you guys.
You said
I did not.
bring 3 watermelon. I'm gonna look on the bloody
You
list. I'm
look,
gonna pull
it
it up.
says watermelons on the list.
I thought it said 3, did it not?
Also, I included how many people were coming, and unless like two people are gonna split a massive watermelon, like, come on.
You know what? I'm looking for it.
Oh, good. You know what? Watermelon is so great. It was a hot week. We went through it all. It was awesome. So no, it was so nice to have you both there as well. It was
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
My whole
No,
family was like, "Oh my God, it's been so while since we've seen you guys. It's so good to
yeah.
visit."
Yeah, yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. We both had a lot of fun. It
Yeah.
was good. And your son, being a naughty, naughty boy with your, nephew,
Yeah, he's a
whipping
trouble.
watermelon at his head.
Between Andrew, so Mare's son Andrew, and
Yeah,
Nathaniel, they pick on poor
yeah.
Henry so much.
Mm,
And I feel like Nathaniel would probably pick on him a little bit, but Andrew being a little bit older was like instigating the older kid picking on things. And
mhm.
and Nathaniel's taken that up now, so it's not good. He got busted.
You did get busted, that's for sure. That's for sure. That was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else new with you?
No, I had one thing on the list which I thought was kind of funny, and you were talking about shopping. Well, yard sales, but shopping. I have this beef, and I was with my sister, who my older sister was off on the week as well, so I spent a little bit of time with her. We went into town. And we go into, I had this on my list as a beef for the longest time, but my older sister works in retail. And this happened while I was with her. and I thought, oh my God, it's perfect that this is happening while I'm with you because maybe there is some fucking explanation for why it happens. Okay?
What?
I'm setting the
What?
scene. I'm setting the
Okay.
scene.
Okay. Okay.
You park your car, you get out, you're going into a store. Let's say it's a store. It's got two doors, right? The double doors to get in or out of the gas station, store, whatever.
Hmm.
You go to pull on one, it's locked. The other one
Yes.
is open. So
Yeah.
why, if you're a store that has two doors, are both doors not fucking open? Because that is a pet peeve of mine and it made me crazy. And so when it happened when I was and it happens so often, I'm like, I have to ask my sister about this because maybe there is some explanation that I don't know about. She's gonna make it all make sense. She goes, they're fucking lazy.
That's what she said.
That's
They're
what she said.
fucking
They're just
lazy.
lazy. They're just lazy. They won't open
No,
two doors. I'm like, are you kidding me? This is like a major pet peeve of mine.
and no older sister like words of
No,
wisdom. It was just they're
no
fucking lazy.
wisdom, no like years of experience in the retail world, like nothing. They're just fucking lazy. I'm like, oh, okay, good. So now when I do give the stink eye, you get up to the cash with whatever you
Yeah.
got. I'm like
Yeah.
stink eyeing them. I'm gonna ask, like, why don't you open both doors? This is a pain in my ass.
You go, CeeLo. You go.
Yeah,
That's a valid pain in the ass
right?
statement. Hmm.
100%. Okay, Bo,
Yeah.
what's on the agenda today?
Oh, today is a very special day, CeeLo. So we've talked a little bit in the past about dysfunctional relationships and stuff like that. And I think we've also mentioned that for a lot of people out there who've been through, um, bad relationships or trauma of some kind, dysfunctional families, that kind of thing, it always helps to listen to other people and hear other people's stories because it kind of helps you relate and not feel so alone and not feel so crazy, and so
Yeah.
it's I know for me and for a lot of other people it's a big help for healing when you engage and listen to others and how they've come through the other side, kind of thing. So today we actually have a special guest.
Yes, we do. Now it feels
Yes, we
weird that I'm
do.
introducing him
I
because
know.
I was like, what's on the agenda? Like,
I
ooh,
know. I introduced your wife. You're
that's
gonna
true.
introduce
Your
my
husband, Dave,
exactly. Hi, Dave.
aka Uncle
Hi,
Dave.
Bo. Hi, CeeLo. How's everybody?
Uncle Dave.
Uncle, yeah.
Uncle Dave.
Yeah.
How
Uncle
are
Hey,
you?
Dave.
honey.
I'm good. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. So,
I'm
like, do you
looking.
give Bo a budget when she goes out thrifting and garage sailing or no?
Shut
No,
up.
I, I drew the line at no more clocks, no more area rugs,
No more
uh,
Oh,
art.
art, and yeah, no
No
more
more.
pictures. And
Yeah.
okay.
if she buys one of those things, she has to purge
Oh, I
one of the
like
stuff.
that. That's a good rule.
That's really
It's
very
much like
true.
my frying pan rule in this house
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we've chatted about.
I
Awesome.
do agree that I have a clock issue. I
Yes.
like an old clock issue, I do agree that I have that. I do agree that I also love area rugs, but I don't tend to buy area rugs at yard sales. I
No.
tend to just do that at
Yeah.
Costco.
Right? I keep seeing
Oh,
the ads for the
so
Ruggable at
yeah, me
carpets. I'm
too.
like,
Me too.
that looks
Okay.
appealing. I'm gonna try maybe like a front door one or a runner, and I'll keep
Yeah.
you posted on whether it's
L-
worth it.
Let me know. Actually, a friend of mine has one and has it in her kitchen. She's got a full wood floor. She has it in her
Oh.
kitchen. She loves it. She absolutely loves it. And I know we're digressing from your wonderful, your wonderful interview on our podcast, honey. But this is what happens when CeeLo and I get together.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
sometimes,
I can deal with
sometimes.
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Dave,
So
you're going to chat with us a little bit about your experience with your family and some of the trials and tribulations and tough decisions that you've made along the way. Why don't
mhm.
you start off and give us a little bit of background? Like mom, dad, siblings, what's up?
So, I don't have a very large extended family. Basically, it was for the most part, it was just me and my mother back in Brampton, and at that time, my grandmother and my uncle lived there as well. Um, I was very, very young when I had first moved to Brampton, and
No,
basic
no siblings, right?
no siblings.
No
No,
sibs.
I don't have any siblings. No. But basically, yeah, it was just pretty much my mother and my grandmother, and basically my uncle, which is obviously my grandmother's son. So
So
Right.
can we also add that his uncle, his grandmother's son, isn't he the same age as me?
yes,
Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
I think my
Yeah.
uncle was literally like 4 or 5 years older than me. So
Yeah.
very,
Oh,
very young family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
wow.
Even my grandmother, like my mother was very young. She had me when she was 17.
Yeah.
And I would say that there's a very good possibility that her mom probably had her only when she was maybe 20 or something as well. Like very,
Hmm.
very, very young. Like my grandmother was not like I spent a lot of my youth with my great grandmother, which a lot of people don't have that experience because of the age of their grandmother and great
Yeah,
grandmother.
totally. I mean, it's kind of lucky whenever I think about, like, I hear stories like that where there's kind of that extended family or the grandparents are in the home as you're getting raised and as a kid, and I'm like, I love that idea. Like, I'd love for the kids to have that. I would have to have a really fucking big house though, I think, for that to happen. Like really big.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And you, what about your dad or your father?
I never knew my dad. Basically, as I said, my mother had me when she was 17. You know, obviously, probably an unplanned type of situation. So, I think that maybe, you know, they were, you know, boyfriend and girlfriend. You know, happened to have me, and then that their relationship just didn't continue. So it wasn't like I was cast out by my father. I
Hmm.
think it was just the fact that, you know, they were young and kind of made a mistake,
Yeah.
and he just went his separate ways, right? So
Do you have any contact with him at all or no?
no, I never have. I think a couple of years ago, Bo had looked him up, and basically, we think she found him. So it was kind of interesting to see that, but I really had no interest because it was almost like looking up somebody that you never knew. Like I'd
Never knew.
probably find it more interesting to look up like a celebrity than my father because I just never knew him, right?
Yeah.
So
You know what's bizarre about this, Elo, is that, first of all, when Dave and I got married, that was the very first time that you found out what your father's name was.
yeah,
Because we actually had to go to the city to register for a license, right?
Hmm.
And on that license, you have to list who your birth mother and birth father are. We had no idea. And so that was the first time
yeah,
that you found out what his name was.
yeah. First and last. No
Because,
idea.
yeah, it was never ever talked about in the family. Nobody ever talked about anything to do with the family or the past.
Yeah.
I actually ended up getting a bit of the history of your mom, and I don't know, I'm sure I shared it with you when,
Hmm.
but we were at Dave's aunt's house for Christmas one year, and she kind of explained that Dave's mom had been in foster care at the time, and it was the son of the foster parents that had gotten her pregnant, and he had convinced her to keep you, and then he was around for the first 6 months of your life, and
Hmm.
then he
Yeah.
left. And we had, like, I googled him and did a little bit of research, and I'm pretty positive I found him.
Hmm.
And he, it's surprising when I look at the picture how I see a lot of likeness between the two of you. I can tell that. I know you were kind of like a little bit, I don't know, but I can see it. I can definitely see
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
I think
And
I'd be curious about the just like looks and, does he
Yeah.
love doing X, Y, and Z and you love doing X, Y, like just some of those like traits and looks and be curious.
yeah, just
Yeah.
to see if there was something that I
Yeah.
Yeah.
inherited from him. You know, everything that I got didn't just come from my mother. There was actually something genetic
Yeah.
that came from him as well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That wonky
The,
big
the
toe
funny
that
the
you
funny thing
have.
is that
The
yeah.
what,
I said the
Silo?
wonky big toe or the crooked
Yeah.
pinky finger,
Yeah. Yeah. The funny thing was is that I knew none of this. Obviously, Bo, being more inquisitive than I am, learned more about my family in the short time that we were together at the beginning than
It's true.
I think it was because you know, and it might sound harsh or whatever, but I just didn't care. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
my family unit was not very tight. There was never any wanting need to know where I came from,
Yeah.
or if I had had quirks of my father, that
Yeah.
type
Hmm.
of thing. You know what I mean, so it's just, you know, uh, she's a little bit more um, assertive when it comes to that type of stuff. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Or just
She
like,
wants to know where you originated.
I think when you grow up with two parents and then you hear your story, Dave, it's kind of like, but don't you want, like, where's the curiosity?
Yeah.
Like, don't you want to know, right? So I think it's,
Yeah.
whereas you grew up, that was just, that was your life. That was always your story. So there was never, didn't necessarily feel like there was some big missing piece or some component that you needed, to figure out what was, what those traits were or whatever. But yeah.
You know,
Mhm.
CeeLo, it's funny that you say that because when Dave and I first got together and we talked about him not knowing who his father was and, that kind of thing. And I was like, well, don't you ask? Don't you ask questions? Don't you have pictures? Don't you have no, 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 no. And
Nope.
and it's like exactly what you just said, which is it was just so foreign to me to not know about your family,
Yeah.
right? That I couldn't comprehend why you had no interest. And he literally had no interest. Like
Well,
he was just like, I
because
just
you
have to
think
fish
of
it.
it as a missing part of his family, but it
Yeah,
wasn't a missing part of his family. It was like,
you're
it
right.
wasn't even it wasn't part of the story really. It wasn't part of, something that he missed after he was a certain age, or just
Hmm.
Mhm.
wasn't like, it
Hmm.
was like your story is just different. That's all.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, like a situation that happened. You know, I might this might be like off topic or whatever,
Hmm.
or it might not be. But I remember that. So my grandmother had multiple husbands, multiple partners. So basically, in my adult life, probably when I was in my 20s, is when I was up in Barrie with my family having Christmas, and my uncle had gone to see his dad, and we had gone out there, and we were sitting there and we were talking with them. We had a beer with them, that type of thing or whatever. And it was as we were about to leave that it sunk in of who I was. So it's like he had no idea. When he found out I was, my mother's son, he was just like, he wanted to hug me. He
Because he
wanted
was
to,
you were his grandson.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. But like I didn't know,
And he didn't
and
know.
he didn't know. So like it goes
That's
to show you that,
crazy.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, like you're meeting your grandfather for the first time, but you didn't even realize you were meeting him. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah. It's kind of surreal.
It
Yeah.
is. It is. So I can set a little bit more of the background tone because I know again, because you weren't inquisitive about any of it and you didn't ask anything. I was sitting there one Christmas Eve with your aunt
Mm.
when we had gone up to Barrie to spend Christmas with them. And this one particular year, she was just very sharing and talkative, and she had given me a little bit of the backstory about your family. So prior to you. So are you okay if I share some of that stuff?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So from what she had mentioned to me, obviously, we've touched a little bit on generational trauma. We've talked about how dysfunctional families literally just kind of carry on that tradition over and over and over again each generation until somebody actually stands up and says enough, no more, and we're going to make some
Yeah.
change,
Yeah.
right? So here's like basically a prime example. So Dave's grandmother, so he had mentioned that she had had multiple partners, right? Um, and she had had children from each of these multiple partners. So all of the kids, so there was, oh gosh, four siblings, five,
My mother, her two sisters, and her brother.
and
Yeah.
her
Yeah.
brother, so
For.
four.
Four. Yeah.
So each of them had different parents, different fathers, I should say. Each of them
Yes.
had different fathers. So she had had children with all of these different men. But what your aunt had mentioned was that at one point in time, so they were all young. So your mom and your aunts and your uncle, they were all really young, and they were homeless. And so she had set up a tent in some park, and she would leave during the day and the kids would be by themselves, and they would try to fish to find some food. The kids would find some food by fishing, and there was a dog, and she said that they felt bad for the dog, so if they did find a fish, they ended up feeding the dog instead of feeding themselves. So they would I mean,
That's
as
kid
kids
logic,
would
though.
be.
That's kid logic, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so they would literally just be starving and not knowing any better. And then the grandmother, or their mother at that time, would come back to the tent with a man, and she would, do some business with the man, and then the man would leave. And, then sometimes she brought home food, sometimes she just brought home alcohol. And that was it. And then eventually they were found and all put into foster care. And that's how all of the siblings had been split up. So they had
Uh,
not had contact for years, years and years. And it wasn't until in their adulthood that they found each other again,
Mhm.
and they began to, socialize again. Now, at this point, your mom had you, your aunt had her kids as well. So this family unit kind of came together. But that's kind of what, started that whole lifeline, if you will.
Yeah.
And then that kind of lends itself into the dysfunction that you had to endure when you were growing up, because obviously, it's passed down,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. It almost sounds like something out of the playbook from like the Gallaghers from Shameless.
Yeah.
right?
Actually, it kind of does. Isn't that
White
scary? Yeah.
trash. Yeah.
I'm
Honey,
gonna call you Uncle Dave Gallagher from now on.
Uncle Dave
no,
Gallagher.
don't
Yeah.
you dare. It was not white trash.
I know. I'm just
It was just the way that, it's unfortunate.
just trying to make light of it. That's
Yeah,
all.
of
Yeah,
course.
well, and I think like I mean, I do the same thing when when the conversation sometimes gets tough, like I'm always good for a little jokey. Um,
Hmm.
but you hadn't, Dave, your mom had never shared any part of that story with you. It wasn't until your aunt got chatting with Inquisitive Beau over here some Christmas time that you had no idea that that's how she kind of grew up and her experience.
No, no, I didn't really know. I remember looking at photo albums when I was younger,
Yeah,
and almost just like looking at it just like you were looking at just some other family. Like, yeah, I didn't know who the people were. I didn't know what the situation was. And again,
wow.
I think even in my younger years, I just didn't really care. I didn't.
Yeah, yeah, total.
I wasn't raised to understand that family unit was there.
No,
You know what I mean?
I don't think that, I mean, there's probably some questions when we sat down and chatted with mom some days, like where that you start to ask her some questions about her experience, but it was more like that she was willing to share some of those stories and experiences with us when we were
Mm.
chatting about something or whatever. So I don't find it so curious that you didn't ask like, how did you grow up and what did your mom do to, like that kind of line of questioning. I don't find that odd that as a kid or even as a teen that you didn't ask those questions, but I find it curious that she never shared that with you as part of some kind of storytelling or something, you know?
And
Yeah, like the idea of basically, you're sitting down with your kid and say to them, do you want me to tell you anything about, your aunts or
Or,
uncles, or do you want me to tell you anything about your father, like just so that you understand, like, you know,
well,
why you're at where you are
yeah.
now? Yeah, like
Or no, you're gonna eat that hamburger I just made for you. Like how I grew up, we had to fish for our food and then we fed a dog, like just stories like
mhm.
that where I'm like, it didn't come out.
There
It's
was
kind of
there was
weird.
just, yeah, like
Yeah.
there was no place for those stories
Yeah.
because there was no survival in it,
mhm.
right? It was just, that was a nicety. Life was more about surviving.
Yeah.
But it's funny, and I wonder, and we will never know because I don't know if you actually remember, honey, but I remember, CeeLo, when your kids were young, really young, and they would, as they were starting to kind of learn a little bit about the difference of families, there were points in time when each of your children had made a comment about, you know something along the lines of, is that my dad, or do I have a dad, or, like, because they would see other families that
Yeah.
had a male figure called dad. And so I think that there had been some questions which you guys were able to address, which is fine. And I just wonder if there was a point in time in Dave's very young life where he had asked the question, because you would have seen other friends of yours having a mother and a father figure, and you may have been curious, as any child would be, do I have one?
Hmm.
Right? Like, where's mine? Why don't I have one?
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
wondering if maybe you were just shot down because your mom was never forthcoming with any information.
Yeah.
And maybe then you just learn not to ask. I don't know.
That's true. And I think too, like as a for instance, I think one of the reasons why maybe I didn't, go that far back and actually wonder about that stuff is because, you know, from when I was really young, my mother had basically like a boyfriend that was like a live-in type of boyfriend that was there for most of my,
Uh-huh, yeah.
my early teens, like,
Mhm.
and prior to that.
Mm.
So, I never called him dad, but it was probably the closest thing that I ever had to it.
Yeah.
So it's almost like why look further back than that? Because that's all that really
Right.
mattered to me. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
before that, there was no actual like real vivid memory or anything. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So you now, as an adult, you no longer have a relationship with your mom, right?
no,
Okay.
yeah. Obviously, there were circumstances
Hmm.
that led up to the downfall of the relationship between my mother and myself.
Hmm.
I think that it's a long story, but I think that, and there was a lot of things that led up to it,
Hmm.
but there was probably one major interaction between us that caused that downfall.
Hmm. You want to talk about that? You want to share that?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah, so basically, I'd say for most of my late teen, early 20s part of my life, and probably even because we didn't get together until
Our
early
30s.
30s.
Hmm.
I lived at home, but I was always living with my mother, and I was always paying rent, basically, almost like to be honest with you, almost like a boarder in the house.
Right.
You know what I mean? I was her son, but at the same time, I was like, yeah, I was a person that basically helped pay rent, helped pay a mortgage when it got to that point where she had actually bought a house type of thing.
Right.
So yeah.
And I think, if I remember correctly, I think you had moved out when you were 16. And I
Yes.
remember you telling me that your mom would, whenever she broke up with one of these men, like, she would be okay to let you go. But then when she broke up with one of these men, she would be calling you back because she couldn't financially afford
Yeah.
the
So
apartment
when I
or.
when I decided that I wanted to kind of like do my own thing and leave home, or the first time that it happened, I had a big disagreement with her boyfriend at the time, and he kind of like tossed me out type of thing.
Yeah. I was
Go
gonna
ahead,
say
Pam.
at 16 to be living on your own, like there's got to be something more to that because I'm sure that there's like my daughter's 16. I'm sure there's times where she's like, I wish I lived on my own and like had all my own things and own space and blah blah blah. But like logistically, financially, there's no way that that's happening, right? So at 16, you decided to leave the house that you were
Well, he was
in.
kicked out, I think, right?
Well, it was a major disagreement between my mom's boyfriend at the time, who was the boyfriend that she was with for most of my young
Yeah.
life. And basically, I had had a friend over. We had a little bit too much fun one evening, and he didn't quite care for the state of the basement where we were hanging out, and there was some words exchanged, and basically he just told me to get out. So I basically packed a bunch of my stuff in a black garbage bag, and I had a friend who basically lived up the street from me, and I went up there and I just said, "Hey, can I you know,
Crash.
can I crash here?" You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So I was very close with his mother and his grandmother and his brother and sister. So it wasn't really a problem. And then so while I was in my early part of high school, I was living in the basement of one of my best friends at the times. Living in his basement. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And then did you ever get your own room, or like, didn't you
Um,
rent a room somewhere?
I did, but that was later. Like
Okay.
so like I think that it was one of those things where and it's hard to remember the timelines because I think just because in my mind I'm like I have a hard time holding on to those scenarios
Yeah.
because of the fact that we never really held on to any memories per se.
Hmm.
But I would say that I was with him, until she had basically she basically had an instance with this boyfriend where she felt threatened by him, and she finally decided to leave him. And then that's when she cast the line and sucked me back in, basically to say, oh, I need help. You know what I mean? I can't live on my own. I can't afford to blah blah blah. So she had moved. I had moved in with her, and the landlord tenant agreement continued along again, right?
Yeah.
Did you pay for rent when you were 16 or 15 or 14 or?
As well, at the time that would have been 16. So by the time she had severed a relationship with him, I probably would have been 17 at the time. And I was paying
You were paying rent.
Yeah. And I was working part-time at I think it was like Max Milk or something like that at the time. But yeah, I was contributing.
Yeah.
It might not have been like like what you would think of rent is at this time.
Oh God,
But
no.
but
But
like
I think that
but she had no problem taking my part-time money to ensure that she filled the gap until she found the next man that could kind of fill that
wow.
void for her.
And
Well,
were you still going to high school too at this time?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that strange if teenagers are getting part-time jobs for them to contribute in some way to the household. If we don't financially need it, maybe I'm taking that $50 a month or whatever it is and putting it aside as, extra savings for her when she graduates school or something like that, right? But like, I don't think it's that strange. I mean, not contributing the entire paycheck because that seems kind of crazy, but a portion of it just so they start to learn to manage their money and do some budgeting and all of that stuff. I don't get the sense that that was the plan though for you, Dave.
No, not at all.
No, I don't think so. I mean, just based on the back and forth, right? It
Yeah.
was the, I'll call you back to my home when I need
When
you
I need,
financially.
yeah,
But outside of that, if somebody kicks you out, oh well, fend for yourself. Doesn't seem like it's really I'm, teaching my son something. I think it's really more of her survival versus his,
Yeah, and then like I said, like say that first time when it happened, I talk about it now like as if I knew all along what her agenda was or
right.
whatever. But at the time I was just like, oh, I have to help my mom. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's you know what I mean. So that first time where I'd come back and kind of been contributing when I had a part-time job, it probably just seemed innocent. It probably just seemed like it was your sonly duty.
Yeah. I'm gonna go back and help mom.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
It was just the as time went on, and every time that I decided, okay, say when I hit like when I was 19 and I was like, I want to move out of the house, you're done high school, that type of thing or whatever, and I'm out doing my own thing and whatnot, and then her relationship problems would happen, and then she would put that almost that guilt of what am I gonna do? You know what I mean? What
To
am I
pull
gonna
you
do?
back
So
into the
exactly.
house.
So it wasn't like it was like like I wasn't allowed to try to just go and have my own life. It was like I always had to get pulled back to her, and I think
you had to take care of her.
Yeah, and I think that the thing that really opened my eyes was, as I said, when I got older and I started seeing the behaviors and realizing that she didn't need me as much as that she would lead you to believe. She wasn't, as you said, CeeLo,
Yeah.
basically, trying to teach me some responsibility or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She had the money. She had the ability to fend for herself. She just wanted more, and she wanted to do it at the expense of me.
So there's CeeLo, I don't know if I ever told you this, but when Dave and I first decided to live together before we got married.
Living in sin.
I know, right? So we had made the decision that we were going to move in together.
Yeah.
And when Dave had mentioned this to his mom did make you feel quite guilty. She was like, what am I going to do? How am I going to survive? Without you helping pay the mortgage, how am I going to survive? So, just to kind of, backtrack a little bit, Dave had encouraged his mom to buy this house instead of just renting. And she had, bought this house. Dave, you were young, like you were like a teenager, like a late teens, I think,
Mhm.
when the house was bought, right?
Yeah.
Maybe early 20s, something
Yeah.
like that.
Somewhere around there.
And so when the house was bought, his mom had put him on the deed without Dave realizing, like, just, because he's just following what his mom says to do, sign here.
Hmm.
He didn't realize that it was the deed to the house. And then she used his first time home buyers option so that she could get free land transfer tax. But then she took that ability for Dave to ever have that
To use
if he
it.
was to
Yeah,
ever buy
because
a
it's a
home.
one and done thing.
It's a one and done thing.
Yeah.
And she had never owned a home, so she could have used it for herself, but she didn't. Okay. But then when she started to guilt Dave to say, because Dave was basically saying, when you buy this house, I'm going to help you. I'll obviously pay, half the mortgage and, yada, yada. So when he said that we were going to be moving in together and she said, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Thank goodness for your aunt, because your aunt said to both of us, listen, I know what your mom makes. I know what your mom has. She is fine. She does not need you.
Yeah.
Go and live your life. That is what his aunt had said.
Well,
And
thank
that I think made the
goodness.
difference. Right? Really, thank goodness, because I could tell he was totally torn. He didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
He didn't know how to manage that situation of moving in with
Well, because
this
Dave's like an empathetic guy, right? Like
100%.
he's gonna know, like, oh shit, you need my help? What can I do?
Yeah.
I'll come and help, whether it's your mom or probably any one of your friends. I'm sure if I called you up tomorrow and said, Dave, come help me with this, you'd be like, okay.
Yeah.
Like he's a willing guy, he's empathetic, he's,
Mhm.
thinking about others. And so I'm kind of curious though, that where is your mom in the birth order with the two sisters and her brother?
She would have
She's the
been.
first.
So she
She
was
was
the
the
oldest.
first. She was
She's
the
the
Yeah.
oldest. Yeah.
oldest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. It would have been her, then both my aunts, and
That's right.
then my
And then,
uncle.
So
yeah.
a lot of, like, I'm not defending your mother, but a lot of the responsibility on her younger siblings fell to her because her mother was not.
Well, actually, not really,
No, because they all
because
split up.
they did. So,
But not, they were
when
in the tent.
no, Dave's mom at that point, because she was considerably older than the other siblings,
Yeah.
she was already in foster care at that point. So
Oh,
she had been taken out of the mom's home, put into foster care, and then the mom continued to have children with other
I
men.
see. I see.
And they stayed with her. Yeah. So they didn't really know each other.
At
In
all.
fact, not really. It was probably more your two aunts
Yeah.
that were closer, because and
If
same with
if
your
I look at
uncle.
pictures when I was just like either a
Mhm.
baby or around 2 years
Mhm.
old or whatever,
Yeah.
the pictures I see were with my two aunts. And I remember when you have those like vague memories of when you were really, really small, those are the memories that I have. I remember them pushing me around in a carriage, you know what I mean? But
Mhm.
I don't really have any memories of my mother in that time frame,
Yeah.
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So eventually they help you feel comfortable enough to say, okay, I'm going to go live with my fiance in sin. I'll say it again. Um, and your mom must have been pissed about that. Pissed at you and probably pissed at the sisters for saying, no, it's okay, you go.
Well,
I don't
I
know.
and I don't even know. Like, I don't know if it was ever, brought to her attention that her sister had basically
No,
kind of,
she didn't know.
given that
Okay.
information. Yeah,
Yeah.
No, she
because
didn't know.
to be honest with you, yeah, they were very close in their, like, once they had gotten to the point where they knew each other.
Yeah.
Mhm.
She wasn't as close with her other sister,
Mhm.
just because she had basically moved really far away and had kids,
Mhm.
and just didn't really interact with them. Like, I had only met them maybe once,
Yeah.
in my adult life, and it was just because they had come to, like, my aunt's wedding, the one that I was closer with.
Right.
So yeah, so like, yeah,
Mhm.
I never really knew them. So
Yeah.
Interesting. And
Yeah.
then,
yeah.
so you obviously did live in sin for a little while before you got married. And I think
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
a while, like I can remember about you telling me about, going out to visit Dave's mom out in Brampton or whatever, like things were okay for a little bit.
Yeah, they were fine, and at the time, Dave's mom had a friend of hers that had been renting the basement of the house
Hmm.
for the longest time, and so she wasn't really alone, and she did have extra income coming in as well, and she was working full time also, and but things were fine, and we would go to visit. But I'll let Dave kind of talk a little bit about what led to the downfall
Yeah, what
of
was
the
the
relationship. Yeah, like
catalyst or
what was.
whatever for you to
Mhm,
not
Yeah,
talk to her
yeah.
anymore?
So
mhm,
basically, we would go out there more often than not. We always traveled out to Brampton to her. She wasn't, overly comfortable driving on the highway, so we would always, be the ones that would go out there to see her.
Yeah.
Whether she had like a backyard party, like some kind of like summer get together, or if it was somebody's birthday or
mhm,
something like that, we would go out there and see her.
mhm.
Um, and so basically, like if we're leading towards the whole downfall aspect, the whole thing that kind of started to spiral us away from each other. Um, she had this border, and she was a, I would say, definitely like an alcoholic. Like every time that we went over there, she was like almost falling into the fire pit. She had fallen down the stairs, broke her hip.
Oh, geez.
We'd heard several stories about the fact that she had fallen asleep with a cigarette in her hand, down in my mother's basement, which in turn, as you heard, is my name's on the deed,
Yeah.
and you know what I mean. It's basically my house, so anything that would have happened to that house with my name affiliated with it
Yeah.
would have come back and haunted me as well. So basically, with all that happening, so I felt like because of the fact that she wasn't conducting her tenants down in the basement well, like she was just basically allowing that type of behavior to happen, and I just wasn't really comfortable with it. I started to instigate the idea that I didn't want to be on the deed of the house. I didn't want to, you know what I mean? I wanted to be removed from that
Yeah.
because I had basically made, a hard rule in the sand saying, I looked up, what was acceptable behavior, what was the acceptable conditions for a basement apartment. And there were things that she was doing and the things that she had in place that potentially didn't fit that
That your
um,
mom was doing,
criteria.
or that the tenant?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
So it was.
as a person that's renting the
Right, right,
basement, it's
right.
her responsibility to
To
make
keep it
sure
on
that.
the up and up, a legal basement apartment or
Yeah,
whatever, right?
Yeah,
Okay, okay.
yeah,
that's the key,
like the
CeeLo. It wasn't
idea the
legal.
idea of having like a hot plate or a microwave or whatever, or having a proper fire door or whatever, whatever
Yeah.
the things that would be in place
You're
that would
obligated to
you
have.
you're obligated to
Yeah,
do
yeah.
exactly. So I basically I tried to help her. I tried to we looked up the things that the insurances that she could buy so that if something was to happen, it would protect herself. She was very uh, not willing to look into that because just going to be money out of her pocket.
Yeah,
So
extra.
she wasn't even thinking about her own personal well being, let alone mine. At the time, I don't want to see something bad. I don't want this woman down in the basement burning the house down with my mother in it,
Yeah.
and I don't want that person dying in the house that my name's on the deed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So basically, I just started trying to move the pendulum in the way that I wasn't going to be on that deed, and I didn't want anything to do with that house anymore. So I basically had stipulated to her, this is what I don't want to see in the house that were there, because I'd read into it and consulted with people
Yeah.
and found out that stuff couldn't be there. And she had told me, I'll make sure that that's not going to happen.
So at this time, CeeLo,
Yeah.
before you go on, honey,
Hmm?
at this time, which is ironic, right? That this was all kind of going down. Dave says this to his mom, says that I'm not comfortable, etc. I want to get off of this deed. And just at around that time, guess who comes over? But the fire department or somebody comes, or somebody calls.
Yes.
So somebody ratted his mom out about having this illegal basement apartment,
Uh,
and the authorities came to investigate the apartment, and they ended up fining your mom $25,000,
holy
Yes.
and she,
shit.
yeah, and she had to go to court as well, because she was running an illegal basement apartment.
Yeah. And then I don't remember exactly the the order in which it happened, but because my name was on the deed of the house, I was actually subpoenaed to go to court, and my mother actually decided that I didn't need to know this, and I can't remember exactly how it was that I found out. Do you remember? Or
So she, there was a letter that came in to you that
Mhm.
went to your mom's address because you're listed on the deed at that address.
Yes.
And we had gone over there for a visit, and then we had seen the document or something, or the letter.
Mhm.
And that's when and we questioned, and that's when she said, oh, it's nothing, I've just been subpoenaed to court, you don't even have to bother coming. And then we started asking questions, but if he's on the deed, does he not have to be there? And sure enough, the letter basically said that he did have to be there. So
Yeah, well, I
she
was
was
being
trying to hide it, I
subpoenaed.
think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
yeah, yeah.
because of the fact, and I think that it was truly because of the fact that I was trying to dictate to her how she should conduct her business in her house,
Right, right.
and that was so
How
very far
dare
from the
you?
truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I just didn't like I was basically at to the point where I tried to steer her in the right direction, and then when she didn't want to kind of listen to like my polite guidance,
Hmm.
I was just basically like, well, if you're not gonna take my advice, and protect yourself as well as me, then I want the f off this house. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? I don't want anything to do with it anymore.
yeah,
And then that's where basically the shit hit the fan. So
Yeah.
basically, we had gone to we had several arguments. I don't have to go into detail in regards to the arguments, but just the fact that we were not seeing eye to eye on the situation with the house. So she had basically reached out to me and said, um, court cases or court appearance or whatever is going to be on this date, but Cindy is going to come with me,
That was the aunt.
the
Yeah.
aunt,
Hmm.
you don't have to come. So I had basically messaged her back and said, I don't have an option.
yeah.
I've been subpoenaed to go to court. So you can bring Cindy if you want,
But I still
but
have to be there.
ultimately I still have to be there. So then, so basically the day came. We went to court, and when I showed up there, it was very, it was starting to get to the point where the relationship was starting to get awkward.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just felt like we went into the courthouse and they sat in the seats ahead of me and I was behind. Um, and basically my aunt, this is when my aunt's colors started to come out a little bit, and she basically started almost dictating like how this whole event's going to unfold. Like, oh, if we go up to talk to the judge, and she was writing notes and passing them back to me, that this is what we should say, this is what we should do. And all I'm thinking in my mind is that like the whole reason I'm here is because I don't want anything to do with this anymore. So
Yeah.
if the judge asks me something that I feel is going to incriminate, I'm going to tell him the absolute truth, not
Yeah.
what you wrote on a piece of paper and hand it to me.
Exactly.
So basically, yeah, it was very awkward. It started to get very manipulative. My aunt was very, very siding with my mom.
I think at
You
one
know,
point she said, I think you should just pay the $25,000 fine
she
for your
she
mom.
she thought
Hmm.
that it was my obligation to pay the fine. I think I can't remember exactly if it was pay the fine. I think I have it in an email
Hmm.
basically that she was basically like that I should be paying like half of it. And I'm like, how about I pay none of it? Because I'm
It's
not the
not my
one.
thing. Like,
Yeah.
It's not his
I
house.
yeah.
He's not
I
benefiting
was
from,
put on
yeah.
I was put on the deed strictly because of the fact that I was young and naive at the time, and she just wanted she needed it there in order for her to apprehend that house. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
I'm kind
so
of
all I'm asking.
curious
Sorry,
though
go ahead.
why she was so adamant about at this point keeping you on the deed. Because you would think like, okay, if she's so manipulative, there's going to be a reason for her to use your name on that deed in the beginning. But then
Yeah.
at some point, your name's on that deed, half that house is yours. So
Yes.
why
Well,
wouldn't she be like, amenable to you
and you
or
know what?
amenable to
There,
you
there's a
taking you
Yeah,
on?
there's a reason for that, CeeLo. So basically, as the story unfolds, just like when she was taking rent from me, when we knew very well that she didn't need to, my mom was very, very money centric. She led everybody to believe that she was helpless, that she didn't have any money, but
Uh-huh.
she had money, and we found that out later. You know
Mm.
what I mean? So basically, the reason she wanted to keep me there is because she actually would have to pay money to get me off of there. You know what
I
I mean? It
see.
wasn't so simple as just like, oh, she has to pay, a bank or a lawyer or whatever. She had to pay to get me off of there. And that was the other thing is that the aunt, not only about paying the fine, but my aunt actually thought that I should pay to have myself removed off of
off
the
of the deed.
deed of the house.
So also there was plans that his mom had put in place that we weren't made aware of just yet at that point, which was she was planning on selling that house, in the next year or two and moving in with her sister. So for her to take Dave off of the deed and spend the money to do that now, she would then have to turn around and pay money to the lawyer again to sell the house. So she was kind of just biding her time essentially. There was that aspect of it, and then there was also the aspect of the fact that I think, because as you mentioned, Dave, that she was very money centric, I think that there was a bit of her that felt, okay, well, if something bad does happen to the house, we're going to have to help bail me out, right? Because if something was to happen in that house with the illegal basement, and that tenant had set it on fire by falling asleep drunk with a cigarette in her hand, and the place was not insured, the house wouldn't be covered. If that family sued her, for
Mm,
you'd be liable. So I think there was a bit of a safety net there too.
Mm,
So
yeah.
I see. Of keeping
yeah,
keeping the tenant sitch on the
yeah.
illegal
I
side.
mean, yeah,
Yeah.
like, it's leading up, and I know, Dave is sharing kind of the story that kind of led to the downfall of them not speaking, but leading up, like setting that tone of the type of family, I think that you came from as well, when you were younger. I mean, just some of the things that we were told, where your grandmother was a severe alcoholic,
Hmm.
and your mom would leave you with her at the age of like 3 so that she could go out, to the bars, but then your grandmother would bring you to a bar, to a pub,
Yeah.
and they wouldn't let Dave in because he was underage, because he was only 3, and he'd be walking up and down
I would just be
downtown Brampton in
I'd just be walking up and
diapers.
down the street. Yeah.
Yeah, in diapers, and the police would actually come and have to bring him home. I mean, it was
Yeah.
those kinds of stories,
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
it's
The whole
that.
tenant deed, like the whole house situation is obviously like the straw
And
that
to
broke
what
the
was
camel's back.
That's it, having to get a job at the age of 8 in order to buy yourself toys, otherwise you wouldn't get any toys, like
Oh,
that
yeah,
kind of stuff.
absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think there was a long history of neglect there,
Yeah. Well,
that
and
led
I
to
think that
this.
I think just like in, as later on, she always had the money to potentially do those things and buy her child toys and whatnot.
Hmm.
She just pretended that she didn't, knowing that,
Well,
I'll just go and do it myself,
well,
right?
Yeah.
and
Which
I
is,
I think too as an adult where you can you know your glasses are clear at that point, right? You see your mom more so for who she is. You see what she has given up or lack thereof for you to grow and do, which was nothing, so you start to see all those things become so much clearer as an adult, right? So
Mhm.
that's a big decision though, to cut your mom out of your life. How do you feel about it now? Like, has anything changed, or are you still not speaking with her?
I'm still not speaking to her. So when basically when when the camel's back was broken, basically when that final straw was dealt out, I just basically said, in a nutshell, I don't want anything to do with you anymore. And there's a lot more to it.
Hmm.
Mhm.
It probably could be another episode
Yeah.
if you actually wanted to
Yeah.
go that deep into it.
Yeah.
But I just basically I said, if you're not willing to, at least adhere to some of the things that I feel like I've bent over backward for you my entire life, and I have a couple little things that I'm asking you that I think are not
Yeah.
unreasonable. So if you're not willing to do that, then I just don't think that I don't think we don't we have a relationship. It just didn't feel like, what am I getting out of it
Yeah.
at all? It was nothing. You know what I mean? Like, it got to the point where I'd speak to my mom maybe once every few months, and it was like, how are you doing? How, oh, look at the weather. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it was so
Surface.
surface and
Yeah.
bullshit that what did it matter anymore? You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So when when I could see that there was that lack of care, and any kind of
Like remorse or bad
remorse
feeling.
for, yeah,
Yeah.
for anything, like, if I had basically told her she had done 5 things wrong, if she would just admit to one of them, I would have been happy.
Right.
But she would just be like, none of that's my fault, it's all your fault,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
So
Toxic.
to
yeah.
just, yeah,
Yeah.
because you had actually written your mom. So like, CeeLo, he was trying, and he was trying to talk to her and trying to get through, as everybody does when they're trying to, deal with making change, right, with their parent. But you had written her an email that kind of outlined some things that you felt were really kind of crappy about your upbringing, and about how abandoned you had been by her at
Hmm.
certain points in your life.
Yeah.
And there was just zero guidance, and you were asking her to take a look at what you're writing, take a look at how you're feeling, and to give you a response so that you guys could have a conversation and try to heal, right?
Hmm.
And instead, her response was very kind of just plain, without emotion. It was like, listen, I gave you food, shelter, and clothing. What more do you want?
Yeah,
Right? I did my best.
which I guess, you know what I mean, like in her
Hmm.
mind, that was
Hmm.
all that her obligation
Hmm.
was to me, was the fact that, you know what I mean, like,
Hmm.
Well,
those very simplistic
not to make
things that are there for
excuses,
survival.
but like she barely got that from her own mother, right? So like she learned that, right? I have no obligation to you. I in fact met my obligation to you is what she's thinking based on how she grew up, right? She gave you a better life than what she had growing up. And so,
Hmm.
not that that's a good enough excuse, but
No.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's you
it's
do
not.
what you know,
it's
you
not,
do
it's
what you
very,
learn, right? Yeah.
yeah.
But you can always do better. And when you've got,
$100%.
yeah,
You see these situations where people break the cycle, and
mm,
their childhood was shit,
yeah,
and they say to themselves,
Yeah.
I'm not going to allow my child to have
yeah,
that same thing that I had. I
yeah,
want to do better.
Yeah.
I want to give them better. You
hmm,
know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was one thing about she put a roof over my head and gave me clothes or whatever. It was the I think the thing that in that email that she had sent back to me after I had bled my heart out and said,
hmm,
this is how I feel, was she basically said, that I didn't have the right to question her.
that she didn't owe him anything.
She didn't owe me an explanation.
Yeah.
Like it was almost like I'm pleading out and saying, I just want to be loved and cared for, like, how
Yeah.
you see children in the movies and shit.
I want to be a
And
Disney movie, god
and
damn it.
she was just basically like, shut up, you little bitch. You
Yeah.
know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't owe you anything, so fuck off.
Yeah.
So
And
Well,
I think
yeah.
turns out you
so
don't owe
that
her anything either,
that's
Dave.
true. Yeah. And I think, CeeLo, that's also kind of what ended everything too for Dave, right?
Mhm.
Because he was reaching out and trying so hard. And then when you make that comment of, yes, she only was doing what she knew how to do, right? She's parenting the way that she learned how to parent, and I agree with you. But now you have your child standing in front of you saying, you're hurting me and you have hurt me. And that is the pivotal moment for that parent to say, oh my God,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
100%.
All it takes
Yeah.
is an "Oh my God, I'm sorry,"
At any
and that
point, like
heals a lot. You know what I mean?
not even
Absolutely.
at
When
that, like that was the straw point, right?
Yeah,
Like there were
yeah,
many, many opportunities along, Dave's growing up years, right? Where she could have said, oh fuck, I could be doing better, right? Like
mhm,
there's so many, and then for Dave to put it in black and white, basically to say like this is how I'm feeling, and for her to still not, you know, pick it up. She doesn't have the capacity to pick it up. I mean, it doesn't matter what
mhm,
you're gonna say, it doesn't matter how
yeah,
you're gonna explain yourself. Like nothing is going to
mhm,
change there. So in a way, it almost makes that decision to cut things off a little bit easier, right?
yeah,
Yeah, yep,
yeah.
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, I will say, I mean, because I know we're coming towards the end of the episode here, but I will say, I mean, you're right. We could do a whole other episode on all the stories of your upbringing and actually write a little book about it, because it's a
Oh,
little jaw dropping at times for sure. Um, but honey, I'm gonna say you have turned into an absolutely wonderful person. You really honestly have. You
Oh,
are
Thank
one
you.
of the best people I have ever known and ever met. And, although you came from that dysfunction, it made you into a really wonderful person. And I'm very lucky to have you.
Thank you.
oh, guys, it's like
Mhm.
it's not Valentine's
I
Day or
know.
anything. It's
I
like,
know. I
Yeah.
know.
If she did
yeah.
something right, she made me strong and independent, I
Oh,
guess, if you wanted to
sweetheart.
look at it from that
Well,
standpoint.
I mean, I think when you grow up in situations like that, you can, Dave, to your point earlier about, the story that you have and the, maybe a tormented childhood, you have a decision to make at some point, right? Like I'm going to be the one who's going to change. I'm going to be the one who's going to figure out something better for me. I'm going to be, that much
Yeah.
better than how, what my experience was. And yeah,
Hmm.
you're an awesome friend and a great uncle, and I know you've spent many hours in my basement playing video games with my son, and I appreciate all of that. So I know,
Uh,
you turned out just fine, luckily for us.
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Well, thank you. Thank you, Sila.
Oh,
thanks for coming on our show
Yeah,
there,
well,
yeah.
honey.
now we've had
Yeah.
both spouses on.
We have. Now we can start shit talking them again
Yeah,
because
Yeah,
we can shit talk 'em.
exactly.
Yeah, totally.
It's
see
gonna
you
be
next year.
it's gonna be hard for you to shit talk me after the wonderful things you just said.
I'll
They
just keep
won't believe you.
yeah, I'll keep reminding her, Dave. I'll be like, you can't be mean to Dave because you said how much you love him.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Sue. All right. Thanks for the conversation. Thanks for
Yeah.
joining us, our dinner guests.
Thanks,
Until
Dave.
next time.
Bye.
Thanks for taking a seat at the table today. We love our dinner guests.
Don't forget to subscribe and follow The Dinner Agenda on the podcast platform you use so that you don't miss any new episodes. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Dinner Agenda.
We look forward to hearing your comments, questions, and even ideas you may have on future episodes.
Thanks for taking this journey with us.